So, Dawn, you recently told me about some research that you'd been looking at.
Indeed. It turns out that about 70% of decisions made in a company are binary. Do this or do not do this. When you do that, you only end up with one option for action. Of the 70% of the decisions that were binary, more than 50% failed. But when they added one more option, do this, don't do this, or hey, maybe do something else, the failure rate went down to 30%.
Wow, that's impressive. Where did you come across this research, Dawn?
Well, the research was done by Dr. Paul Nutt at The Ohio State University. The citation for the research is in the notes below.
This is really interesting to me. So, by increasing the number of options they considered, they were able to reduce the failure rate significantly. And I think that's impressive and could really have a positive effect in organizations. I mean, people spend a lot of time making decisions, and this is a fairly simple thing that would be helpful. But of course, the real reason I like this research is because it's consistent with something that I've observed and something I've been saying for years. And I love it when that happens. Which leads me to the rule of three, something that you and I both talk about in workshops that we do.
The rule of three says if you can't think of at least three things that might be wrong with your understanding of the problem, you don't understand the problem. I learned about it in Are Your Lights On by Jerry Weinberg. The value of the rule of three is its way to check and improve your thinking. Luckily, it also allows you to generalize to other situations where you should at least have three options. For example, the Satir intake model: intake, meaning, significance, and response. In this case, it would be if you can't make three different meanings, maybe you need to slow down and consider what else could my intake mean.
Exactly. I recently was talking to someone who was having a really strong reaction to a situation at work. And she felt like her work wasn't being valued based on how people were interacting with her. So I asked her if there was another possible interpretation of their interactions. She came up with a few more options that were plausible. For example, one option or possibility is that people valued her work and they assumed that she knew that because they weren't complaining. I wonder if that ever happens in anyone's life. Another possibility was that it was a cultural difference because she grew up in a very demonstrative culture, and these folks were from a much more reserved culture. So they weren't likely to be effusive. So having these other possible interpretations, meanings of the interaction she was having with people at work, let her think about the situation differently. And it gave her more options about how she could respond, how she could interact with people. And it got her out of that stuck space of assuming that people didn't value her.
And when we teach finding factors in systems thinking, we encourage participants to come up with at least 10 factors. This gets participants out of their habitual thinking.
Yeah, it's the same thing when I facilitate idea generation with a group. Suggesting that people get to 10 is a way to encourage some creativity and get people past their self-imposed constraints and, as you said, out of their habitual thinking. I've also heard Jerry say, one option is a trap, two options is a dilemma, and when you have three options, then you really have a choice. And it sounds like a lot of those decisions that Paul Nutt studied were actually traps.
Yeah, there were traps. And the way out of the trap is to come up with more options. And as you can guess, you want at least three options.
At least three. And once people have three, in my experience, they can usually come up with many more. It's like it breaks some kind of mental logjam.
So here are some ideas that might help you break a logjam if you find yourself in one. Find a partner. Working in groups of 2 or 3 seems to spark creativity. Slightly different views help create new options. Move to the extremes is another one that we love. Our favorite is, how can we make this worse? Generally when you're working on something, you're trying to make it better. Well, often trying to make it worse highlights leverage points and action items you can take. Change the frame that you're working in. Rather than be serious and all the time work, 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 how could we make it more funny? How can we make it more interesting? And then use analogies. What have we done in the past that's similar to this? How did it work? What's the same in this situation? What's different from the other situation? How is it different?
So now that we've given some examples of how to spark new thinking, I bet our viewers can come up with even more. The rule of 3 is a simple heuristic that can improve your thinking, can improve your understanding, and according to research, it can improve your outcomes.
Thanks for watching. We had a good time creating this video. Stay tuned for more videos. Click the subscribe button so you know when we post something new. And if you have stories about how generating more options kept you from falling into a trap, let us know in the comments.
See you next time.
Bye.